Okay, good evening. We're up to Daf Chavav. Today we're going to begin from Daf Chaf Hey, the second Mishnah on the page. We've been in the middle of a major digression. You would not know you're holding a Masechta Chulin. Again, how did we begin all this? We began by contrasting that Malika is not like Shechita and this bird's like this bird, and we're going one against the other. This Mishnah we're about to do is a little different. This Mishnah is not going to compare in contrast something else, but it's compare contrast within itself. Look at Rashi. We do Rashi before we do the Mishnah. We're discussing temed. Temed is when you have the leads and you take water and you put the leads in the water and you let it soak, and at some point in time it ferments and becomes wine. So we're going to have the distinction when it's water state versus wine state, and different halakas as a result. Says Rashi, Hanami lachi tanya hacha. We learned this over here for this reason. Mishum de damya lahanach delel. It's similar to the previous Mishnayos we mentioned previously. Ella, the ad hashta until now, ayri bitarti mili. We're speaking about two different things. Malika shchita, turin benayina, bedava noig bezu and noig bezu. And one thing is not noig with one is not noig with the other. When we hash the Mairi, and from now we're going to be speaking b'chad milsa in one thing. However, in that one thing, v'yesh b'chilik prakim, it has different halachas at different times. Ubizman shedavar zed noig ba, ein davar zed noig ba. V'yesh man zed noig ba, v'ein zed noig ba. So this is a little different. But again, it's a little digression. It's a little different. The fact that what is it's within one thing, but at different times it has different things. So the first Mishnah we're going to discuss, the first Inyan we're going to discuss is temed, this water soaking in leaves in grape shells, and we want to know at which point in time it becomes wine. My nafkamina, the nafkamina we're going to bring is the Maisa Sheni. Maisa Sheni, you'd have your crops, you'd bring it up to Yerushalayim, but again, it could spoil by the time you get there. It's a big schlep. So the Kodesh Baruch Hu in the Torah gave us a tremendous thing. What did he do? You go ahead. You can take the money, take it, and put it on money. You could take the Ma'aser Sheni, the Kedusha Ma'aser Sheni, put it on money. Money is easier to transport. You bring it to Yerushalayim, and then you would buy B'chol Avos Nafshecha. So basically, you can spend it on everything. You can't spend it on water and salt and mushrooms. You can't spend it on those things. You can't spend it on water. So but you could spend it on wine, right? You could spend it on wine. Okay. We know it's the din of mayim she'uvim. We know this is the din of mayim she'uvim. That mayim, right? That mayim. So there's a halacha, guys, of mayim she'uvim. That mayim she'uvim, if it falls into a mikveh that's a quart short, it's going to pass the mikveh. If the mikveh, this is again the Gemara, you're familiar with the Gemara in the beginning of Makis. If it has 40 saw, then it's bottled to the 40 saw. If it's not, it's going to be passed the mikvah. Okay? So now, says our Mishnah, Hatemed ad shloi hichmitz, temed until it ferments, eina nikach b'kesef maisa. It can't be purchased b'kesef maisa. Why? Because it's water. And you can't spend kesef maisa sheni on water. Upoisel es mikvah, and in addition to that, it'll pass the mikvah because why? It has a din of water, of mayim shuvim. Misha hichmitz, however, once it ferments, nikach b'kesef maisa, it could be purchased b'kesef maisa because it has a din of yayin. Ve'ina paishalas a mikvah because mayim doesn't go ahead and passel a mikvah. Mayim doesn't go ahead and yayin doesn't go ahead and passel a mikvah. So this is what Rashi said. You have one thing. You're not contrasting two things. It's one thing. And in that one thing, it has different halachas at different zmanim. It has different halachas at different zmanim. Okay. Outside, this comes up in Masechta Shkolim. It comes up a few times in Shas. You go ahead and you give a maxis shekel. The maxis shekel would be you purchase the kabbanis for the year or for other infrastructure. Now the coin would wear away. It was a silver coin. It would wear away. So to make sure that you get maxis shekel, you added what's called a kalboin, which is about more kesef. It's a kalboin. Now, it's what? I don't know off the top of my head, but you did what's called a kalboin. Now, if you would add a kalboin if you give for yourself, if somebody else gives you, you don't add the kalboin. Okay. There's a second din. There's a din of ma'aser behema. Shutfin are not chayiv in ma'aser behema. Shutfin are not chayiv in ma'aser behema. Conversely, if it's born underneath their jurisdiction, right? That's before we're going to see the case. It would be chayiv. So here's the case: a man dies and he leaves over to his children. He leaves over animals. That's called the tfusas abayis, right? If they take money from tfusas abayis, you're not chayiv in kalboin, but you would be chayiv in Maisa. Conversely, once they go ahead and they would divide the estate, right, and then become shutfin again, then they be partner Maisa behema and chayiv in the kalboin. So that's the din. So we're talking one individual and two different separate dinim. Says the Mishnah, right? Ha'achin shashutafin, brothers who are partners, kishachayiv bekalboin, when the chayiv in kalboin, meaning if they would go ahead and divide the estate and then reestablish a partnership, they'd be chayiv bekalboin because it's not the father giving to him. If they would take from the estate before the division, it's like the father paying for them. If the father pays the kalboin, if they're not paying, they don't have to pay it. But once they go ahead and divide it up, then it's like they're giving separately. However, Petur and Maisa Behema, they put the Maisa Behema because they're shutfin. Kishachai b'Maisa Behema, right? When the animal is born before they divide up the estate, Petur min kalboin, because if you take the Machzah Shekel from the estate, it's like the father paying the kalboin. Okay, the Gemara is not going to discuss the kalboin at all. So if you have any questions, you can ask it when we do shkalim. But right now we're going to continue and we're going to discuss temet. So the Mishnah made a distinction between at which point in time wine when it ferments, right? And the nafkamina was linyan mikvah, the nafkamina was linyan maisa sheni, and then it was linyan maisa sheni. Mani masnisan, who's the Tana of the Mishnah? Mani masnisan, who's the Tana of our Mishnah? Loi Reb Yehuda, Loi Rabbanan. Ditnan, this is a Mishnah in Maisa, Perikei Mishnah Vav. Ditnan, Hametamed v'nasan mayim b'mida. Someone is making temed, he's making this wine, and he puts in the lees. He puts in a gallon of wine, a gallon of water. And he finds a gallon of extract. In other words, what exactly he put in, that's what came out. Potter, right? Then you'll be potter from Maisa. You'll be potter from Maisa, because we're going to say that what? It's still water. What you put in, you came out. Rabbi Yehuda mechayiv, and Rabbi Yehuda would say what? Yechayiv in Maisa, because he holds what? It's yayin. Look at Rashi in the bottom. Rabbi Yehuda mechayiv b'Maisa, the kula pirihi. We're not going to consider it water. We can consider it piri. We consider it fruit. The chacham in paitrim, and the chacham would say it's potter. Hayav le'noisef maklum. Since you put in a gallon, you came out with a gallon. Even if it tastes like yayin, it's nothing. So now, the main point to make, guys, this Mishnah did not make a chilik between hichmitz v'lo hichmitz. It's mashma, the Chacham hold it's always what? It's always water, and Rabbi Yehuda seems to say it's always wine, right? They don't make a chilik between hichmitz and lo hichmitz, which would lead us to say they can't be the Tan of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah makes the chilik between hichmitz and lo hichmitz, right? They don't make a chilik whatsoever. They say it depends upon what comes out. In other words, if you put a gallon in and 3/4 come out, so obviously you got a quarter, you have wine there, right? Mashen came, so therefore, the Chayra says the Gemara that none money. Irabanan afagav the hichmitz, right? The Rabbanan hold even they didn't make a distinction. So even if it does ferment, it's still water because they said you potter from Isa. Guys, if it's the reason you potter from is because it's water. Reb Yehuda, if it's Reb Yehuda, afagav lo hichmitz. Reb Yehuda says, right? He did not made no distinction whatsoever. So l'chara, neither one. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's wine, even though it wasn't machmitz. According to Rabbi the Chachamim, even though it was machmitz, it is water. So l'chara, it can't be the Tan of the Mishnah. Rav Nachman, Rabbi Baravua says Rav Nachman in the name of Rabbi Baravua, b'shehichmitz machloikis. The machloikis is behichmitz, okay? Machloikis is behichmitz, but loy hichmitz, even Rabbi Yehuda would hold its water. Loy hichmitz, even Rabbi Yehuda would hold its water. So who's the Tan of our Mishnah? Umastis and Rabbi Yehuda, and the Mishnah would be Rabbi Yehuda. It's top Rashi. Behichmitz machloikis, right? That's when the machlokes is between Rabban and Rabbi Yehuda. If it doesn't ferment, Rabbi Yehuda maida delaf pirahu. Rabban afil b'shehikmitz pliki. He even argues with his. So in other words, our Mishnah, guys, eye contact. Our Mishnah makes the chilik between hikmitz and lo hikmitz. Right? Hikmitz, it's wine. Lo hikmitz, it's water. Right? We needed someone to come out in our Mishnah who makes this chilik. It can't be the chachamim of the Mishnah in Maaseh because they don't make the chilik. They say it's always water. Can't be our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda could work out because Rabbi Yehuda says it's only wine when hikmitz, but lo hikmitz, it's water. Very geschmack. Right? Rabbi Yehuda now makes the chilik between two. He could be the Tana of the Mishnah. He could be the Tana of the Mishnah that makes the chilik in hikmitz and not hikmitz. Right? Maslis Rabbi Yehuda. V'chein Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina m'shehikmitz machlokes in that Mishnah in Maaseh is after it fermented. From Rav Nachman Amar Rabbi Avua temed shelachu bekesef ma'isa, temed that you purchased with kesef ma'isa. In other words, the Mishnah we just discussed before was taking off ma'isa, the chiyuv to take off ma'isa. Here now the question is what? Whether you purchased temed with what? With ma'isa sheni money. Now again, it has to be that it has a din of yayin. Ul b'soif hichmitz, and the end it becomes what? It becomes fermented. Kana ma'isa, the person who has the money now is Chulin. The money now is Chulin. Rashi, Kana ma'isa, umisha amois biyada, yachal lechal chutz Yerushalayim. Why? Because the kedusha of the coins was nischalu on the temed. The loy hichmitz. Guys, if it's not hichmitz, it's mashmitz water. If it's not water, the kedusha didn't go anywhere. Good. So again, you purchased. There was a business transaction. The person took ma'isa sheni money and he bought temed. Now he bought temed what? Now if it's water, then the kedusha is on the coins. If it's temed, the kedusha is on the wine. So now it says, when he bought it, it wasn't chaymitz. Well, the b'soif hichmitz, kana ma'isa, my timer, igloy muslim afreya. It shows retroactively the piruhu that it was a piri, and therefore you could spend money on it. Elamaslis and the ktani hichmitz in loy hichmitz loy, right? Our Mishnah says what? Hich makes a chilik between not if it becomes beforehand. In other words, when you spend the money on it, you have to know. Dilma Shafka Havi Machmitz. How can you say Imloi Hichmitz, right? It's water, maybe it'll eventually become what? Wine. You're seeing that what? You have to take into account the future. So maybe eventually what? It'll be wine. Let's see Rashi. Dilma Shafka Havi Machmitz. Heichad Lesa Kamon, when it's not in front of us, Nasal Basa Ruba, let's go after majority. Varuba Machmitzin Hain, and most temet does become fermented. Umitani a nikach upasol, when a Mishnah says you can't buy it, a temed upasol shmami no kol kamad lehechmitz, as long as it when you bought it, it wasn't chaymitz. Afa pisha asa lehachmitz, even though in the future it would become chaymitz. Hahi shaita mi alav piruhu. At this time, it's not. Lehavi chilul. It's not a good chilul. A Mishnah goes and says, makes a statement, guys. You have to know at the time you purchased it whether what it was wine or not. It might be wine. I don't care because again, what did the Mishnah say? Hichmitz lo hichmitz. That's all it did. And now you have a Rabbi Avumi has a problem from our Mishnah. He's an Amoira. He has a problem from our Mishnah. He's making a distinction, saying, you know what? Let's wait and see. If in the future it becomes what? Chaymitz, then the money is neschalo. Our Mishnah's mashma, it's got to be right then and there. So that's the problem. So let's see it in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Ela masnisan the tani hichmitz in lehichmitz loy dilma ishafki havi machmitz amaraba kishashai mimenu v'kois lehichmitz. Our Mishnah speaking where what you left over a kois, it never became chaymitz, and therefore you know for shadow of a doubt that it's water. You know. In other words, we have a kimta. Our Mishnah speaking where you left over a kois, you put the temet in the kois, it did not become wine, so you know for sure without a shadow of a doubt it's water, and therefore it was not the schal poisel. Says the Gemara, it will pass to the mikvah because it's water. Rava Amar, Rabbi says, hum money. Who's the Tan of a Mishnah? It's Rabbi Yochanan Nuri. The Tan of a Mishnah is Rabbi Yochanan Nuri. Now, next piece of Gemara, if it sounds familiar, is Masech Damakis, guys. A very difficult sugya in Masech Damakis. Okay, as previously mentioned, if you have an existing mikvah of 40 saw, you you can put mayim shuvim in it. As a matter of fact, that's what they do. You have an existing mikvah, they let water in from pipes. That's what they do, right? But if you don't have an existing mikvah, there's a psul derabbanan called mayim shuvim. You have three loigim of mayim shuvim, three loigim of mayim shuvim pasal mikvah. The case at hand is you don't have 40 saw. You don't have 40 saw. You may not have three loigim of water because you have either yayin or milk getting mixed into the water. So if you look at the physical aspect of the liquid, you do not have three loigim of water. You do have two. Let's say I'm just saying a quarter. You have 2 and 3/4 water, and you have a quarter either milk or a quarter of wine. Okay. Now the question is, if you view it as water, it's going to be mayim shuvim. If you view it as yayin, it's not. So that's the discussion at hand. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says you go after the appearance. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says you go after the appearance. So therefore, he takes into account. You look at it. What does it look like on our Mishnah? It looks like water. Okay, says the Mishnah. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Amar Hamani, who's the Tana of Mishnah? It's Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. The Tana of Mishnah, guys, is Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Ditnan, a Mishnah mikvois. Gimel loiging mayim chasa kurtiv. It's a quart short. Shenafal l'taycha kurtiv yayin. So you don't have a full 3 loig of water, but you have 3 loig of liquid. Umarein kamari yayin. It looks like wine. V'nafal mikvah, and it falls into it's not a full mikvah, but it falls to a mikvah that's also short. Loi paslu. It's not going to pass a mikvah because it doesn't have a din of mayim. Gimel loiging mayim chasa kurtiv shenafal l'taycha kurtiv chalav. Now you have machlokes. Umarein kamaya mayim, because the milk does not impact the color of the water. V'naflu mikvah loy paslua. Tanakama says again. Tanakama says you need 3 loiging of water. I don't care what it looks like. You need 3 loiging of what chazusa. You don't care about chazusa. You care about that you have 3 loiging of water. Rabbi Yochanan ben Numi's opinion. Hakoil hoylach acha amara. Everything goes after the appearance, right? Everything goes after the appearance. So guys, by yayin, it won't pass the mikvah. By milk, it will pass the mikvah because 2/3 of water and a quarter of milk that looks like water will pass the mikvah. So you go after appearance. Lavam Rabbi Yochanan Bachi Chasusa Slinon, that you go after what? The appearance. Hachanami Zilbasa Chasusa. You go after the appearance in our Mishnah. The time of the Chasusa, the Hai Mayaninu, right? And the tam and Chasusa of our Mishnah is water. Again, the temed, it looks like water, it tastes like water. Guys, the temed looks like water, it tastes like water. And therefore what? That he's the Tan of the Mishnah, and therefore you don't have a problem according to the appearance of Rabbi Baravua. Okay, now, Rabbi Baravua said the Mishnah speaking is machloikis between the Mishnah and Maisris. The machloikis is between when Mishnah hichmitz. But when loy hichmitz, Rabbi Yehuda was maida, right? Rabbi Yehuda was maida that if it wasn't chaymitz, that if it didn't ferment, he was maida that it was water. And therefore he could be the Tan of the Mishnah. Rebbe Lazar is going to argue on that. Upligi de Rebbe Lazar. And Rav Nachman, who said in the name of Rabbi Ravu that the machloikis between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is by hechmitz, argues in Rebbe Lazar. Dam Rebbe Lazar, hakol maidim, everyone's maida, sheim mafrishin olav mimakam acher. This temed, you can't be mafresh from another place, elim kain hichmitz. Until what? Until you know for sure it became chaymitz. Kesavar, beloy hichmitz machloikis. Because he holds that what? Beloy hichmitz is the machloikis. How can I go ahead and it's the following? Guys, I have here, this is the temed. What am I going to do? I'm going to say, you know what? It's tevel. I'll take off in another place. I'll take off trumas and ma'aser from here. Right? I'll take, now maybe if it's water, it's not chayiv. It's not chayiv. So if you take it off from another place, you may be taking off from what? From a chayiv, something that's chayiv, ala patur, which you can't do. Now, he's saying that this is even, tell me that even before it was chaymitz. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that even if it's not chaymitz, Rabbi Yehuda elamina, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda elamina ubei, to take off from the temet itself, al maloi. So therefore, if you look at Rashi, Elam Kain Hichmitz, from about 10 lines up from the bottom, about 12 lines up, Temed Zeshu Bo L'Takein, He wants him to talking this wine or this water. Now, how do you know Rebbe Loza argues on Rav Nachman? Again, Rav Nachman said the machlokes is when it became fermented. According to Rebbe Loza, the machlokes is even before it's fermented. With the Kama Rebbe Loza, Aliba de Rebbe Yehuda, the Eim Afrishin Olav Makam Acher, Mechal de Mechayev le Rebbe Yehuda, B'loi Hichmitz. Guys, look at me. Fellas, if you're telling me that everyone agrees before it ferments that it's water, why would I have to be mafish Tumas Maisa? Again, if everyone agrees this is water, why should I be mafish Tumas Maisa? Ella must be Rabbi Yehuda says what? It's even what? Even if loy hechmitz. So in other words, we're making an observation, a diak, that Rebbe Loza must argue and say afilu loy hechmitz, that it's considered yayin. Afilu loy hechmitz, it's considered yayin, right? Guys, you good? Let's finish Rashi. Geshmaka Rashi. Says Rashi, the Adkan le Mechayev le Rabbi Yehuda elamina mine ubei. Rabbi Yehuda is only chayiv take of Trumas Maisa from it itself. In other words, I can separate from the bottle I just was holding in my hand. Av mimokam acher from another place, afilu hu kiyotze boy, even if it's the same temed shlei hichmitz that wasn't chaymitz yet, loy. Shem is also the hachmitz of a pira, v'zeh ain't also the hachmitz. Look, right? And you'll be mafish min aptur al chiv. Guys, I'm gonna go over here. This is water, right? Right now it's water. So again, you see that he holds that what maybe a bin chaymitz. You're gonna take it off from another place, correct? Let's say this becomes chaymitz and this doesn't, or vice versa. You'll be taking off from something that's chayiv al patur. The bottom line is we all need one point. The fact that what he holds, you have to take off Trumas Maisa. I feel lehikmitz. Clearly, he argues on Rav Nachman, who says there's no machloikis. There's no machloikis in lehikmitz. Again, the top line of the Gemara, machloikis b'shehichmitz machloikis. That's what the machloikis is. But where it's not hechmitz, where it's just not fermented, it's water. Comes along Rebbe Loza says even when it's lehikmitz, Rabbi Yehuda still holds that what it has a din of wine. Good? Very good. Tan Rabbanan. Hatemed actually hechmitz amid beis. Meshiku b'mayim. Okay, this is like where you forget you're totally in Masech the Chulin. You have no shaykhs. You think you're mikvois, guys. You think you're mikvois. Generally, if you have something that's tummy, any food, you can't put it in the mikvah. You could take, let's say you have a piece of food that would touch nevela. It's mamish now a rishon l'tumah. If you throw it in the mikvah, you're doing nothing. You're doing nothing, right? You're ruining the mikvah, right? But you're not being matar to meat. Mayim, guys, has an interesting din. Mayim, if it becomes tummy and you put it back in water, it's like it goes back to its source. It's called hashaka. It goes back to its source. So if you have, let's say you have this temed, and you go ahead and you would attach it to the mikvah, if it was tameh, what's the din? So temed mishehiku b'mayim, mishehichmitz a mishehiku b'mayim. Okay, that's another example of the nafkamina between what? Between mayim and yayin. If it's mayim, it's shayach hashaka, which we go ahead and purify it. If it's yayin, it's not shayach hashaka. Amar Rava, says Rava, loishanu elashetomdu mimayim tohirim, is that it's loishanu that when you made this wine, you used taradika water. The nitmu and then it became tamei. Aval tamei meikara, but if it was tamei initially, loy. It was tamei initially what? Not. It was tamei initially not. Like says Rashi, loy shanu the mishiku b'mayim is only when the mayim itself initially was tar and then it was mekabel tuma. Aval tamei meikara loy. If you go ahead, what? If you can go ahead and take tummy to go. In other words, this yayin is tummy. There's two ways that it became tummy. It became tummy after you went ahead and put the water in, or it became tummy even before you put the water in. It was tummy. Good. That's the shaila. So says Rava, this din of ashaka to go ahead and be metaher mayim is only if the mayim that was in the temed was tahar. But if it was tummy when you put it in, there's no. And now Says, comes along Rav, what's the difference? Comes along, Lo Yosel says, Osel Rav Gavia may ksil, 4 lines down. Osel Gavia may ksil, Amr L'Shmaitza Kamei de Rav Ashi, said in front of Rav Ashi, Maishna Tmei may Kara Deloi, Daminan Aydin Maya Yakiri, since water is heavier, Shachne Tutoi, it lies at the bottom, Upiri Kapi Milael, and the fruit, the temer, the wine floats on top, like a solik lu hashaka l'mayim, and therefore it's not going to go into the water. So ihachi tahayin b'seif nitmunami. If that's the case, then even if it's tahar and in the end it became tummy, also you should have that problem. In other words, you're telling me it's a physical problem. It's not a halachic problem. You're telling me it's a physical problem since the water is heavier and it goes down, and the fruit part stays at the top. And therefore, when you do ashaka, it's not touching the water. What difference is the water was tummy before and there afterwards? It should not make a difference. It must be that what? You mixed it up. Once you mix it up, there's no difference. Right? Once you mix it up, there's no difference. So the distinction you wanted to make is not a distinction. Okay, going through Shas again, we're familiar with the halacha of a man being able to, Pashas Mishpatim, to sell his daughter as an Omer Ivriya. Right? He sells his daughter as an Omer Ivriya as the katana. Purpose being, he really wants to marry off his daughter. Right? He wants the person who buys her to do yiyud, and that the kesef of the mechira should be kesef of kedushin. That's what he wants. When she becomes a naira, she goes free. We also notice halacha of kanas for a ma'anis, a case of rape, right? That you have to pay 50, right? You have to pay 50. Kol makom sheish mecher, any place there's a mecher where you could tell your daughter, you could sell your daughter when she's a katana, and kanas. The Tana of this Mishnah holds the kanas is only by a naira, not by what? By a katana. We don't hold like this, by the way. This is Reb Meir. Kol makom sheish kanas ein mecher, and any time you're going to play kanas ein mecher, because kanas, in other words, since this kanas is only when she's a naira, you can't sell her as vad as an Amavriya anymore. Kalvachayim, Madach, she goes free, certainly to go ahead and sell her, you can. Madach, she goes free as an naira wrestler, so to free her she can. So I'm Rav Yehuda Marav, Zudiv Reb Meir. This Mishnah Reb Meir says there's no kanas by what? By a katana. Yesh kanas by a katana by makamecha. There is kanas by makamecha. In other words, when she's a katana, you could sell her, and there's kanas if you ma'anas a katana. The Tanya, katana in bas yomecha at shetavi beisaris. Yesh lo mecha vein lo kanas. This is Rabbi Meir. Katana, from the time she's born until she's 12, there's no kanas. Shetavi beisaris at yispager from 12 in a day. That's usually when she means beisaris. Till what? 12 and 6 months. Yesh lo kanas vein lo mecha. Div Reb Meir. So that's our Mishnah. Reb Meir said, "Kol makom sheish mecha vein kanas, kol makom sheish kanas vein mecha." That's a bia, guys. When it's three in a day, it's considered a bia. Actually, it's bager yesh la kanas. So if a person's ma'anas katana, there would be kanas and there's mecha. It says more kanas in mecha loy. Ema af kanas b'makamecha. Even kanas b'makamecha. Okay, so quickly, I went through this very quickly. Again, there's 2 halachas over here. There's a halacha of selling your daughters and Amrivriya, and a halacha of kanas that the person has to pay. Kanas for being ma'anis. Says that Mishnah that it's however kanas is only by you can't sell it when she's a naira. Kanas is only when she's a naira. So anytime you won't be able to sell her, there's kanas. Anytime you would be able to sell her when she's a katana, there's no kanas. That's the opinion of Rameya. The Chacham says no, that there's a kanas by what? By katana, and also you could sell her, so you can't say kol makom sheish kanas. Kol makom sheish miyun ein chalitza, kol makom sheish chalitza ein miyun. Okay, another halacha. I'm telling you, yeah. A lot of information this evening. Okay, speaking to the Sadisha, a father has a right to go ahead and marry off his daughter, right? Midaraisa. If the father's not in this world anymore, and we're worried that this poor girl, will not be, married off with a protector, then her mother or brother could go ahead and marry her off when she's a katana. However, when she gets of age of naira, she could refuse the marriage without a get. That refusal is called mion. And if chalitza, of course, is when what? Where the guy doesn't want to do yibum, that's chalitza. Okay, so now the Mishnah says any time sheyesh mion, that means when she up till she's a naira, ain't chalitza. Chalitza ain't mion. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Zudir Rav Meir, V'chol Moimim Yesh Miyam B'Makom Chalitza, the Tanya, Ad Masay Abbas Mamenes, Ad Shetavi Shtei Saras, the Rav Meir, Rav Yudaimer, Ad Sheyarba Hashachar Alavan, the area, the Isamakam, it's a little later Zman. It's where there's more, the hair is longer. Says the Mishnah, Kamakim Sheish Tekiya. Okay, now the last din of the Mishnah that we're doing is the din of Havdalah. But guys, by Shabbos, they used to blow 3 times. 1 for Malacha, 2 for what? For that was in the fields, 2 for the stores to close down, and the 3rd time that it's Shabbos. So that's 6 times 2, 2, 2. That was the Tekiyas. Now they would blow also between Yontif and Shabbos, not only between Chol and Shabbos, but Yontif and Shabbos. Okay, keep that in mind. Homakim sheish tekiya in Avdallah. Homakim sheish tekiya. Anytime that what is the tekiya, you don't make Avdallah. What?
Friday was short, so it was Shabbos.
Yeah. Homakim sheish tekiya in Avdallah. Homakim sheish Avdallah in tekiya. What does that mean? Yontif shechali is erev Shabbos. If Yontif falls on erev Shabbos like this year, Toikin they would blow v'lei mavdilin, but they won't make Avdallah. But Mitzvah Shabbos. Mavdilim v'lei toikin, right? And Mitzvah Shabbos, you make Avdallah, but you don't blow. Ketzeh Mavdilin. What do you say? What Avdallah you say from Yom Tov to Shabbos? Mavdil mikodesh l'kodesh. If the story says mikodesh chomer l'kodesh hakal, right? So now says the Mishnah, Hechi toiko. How would they blow between Yom Tov and Shabbos versus Yom Tov and Chol? Guys, Yom Tov and Chol, I just told you they blew 6 times, but again. If it's on Yontif, you're not working, the stores aren't open. What tekiya would they be different? It says Mehechi tekiya when they blow from Yontif to Shabbos. Rav Yehuda tekiya umaria mitach tekiya. Instead of blowing a tekiya and a trua, they'd make tekiya and the trua right into it. They'd go right into it. V'asiyah tekiya umaria b'neshima achas in one breath. Iskim Rebbe Asi b'chutzil kishmaitza that they would go ahead and do it in one breath. Meisivei. Yontif shechali is erev Shabbos. If Yontif falls down on erev Shabbos, toikin v'le marian. They would go ahead. They would make a tekiya, but not a trua. My lav le marian klal, right? And it's a kasha sai on the sai in Rabbi Yehuda and sai in Rabbi Asi, because Rabbi Yehuda says you would make a tekiya mitoich, and Rabbi Asi says b'neshima achas. Either way, they're both saying you have to do a tekiya. Either way, they're both saying you have to do it. Excuse me, a trua. Even if you have to do a trua. Michal says no light. Rabbi Yehuda mitaros l'tamei. Rabbi Asi mitaros l'tamei. They wouldn't go ahead and blow by itself. Right? In other words, usually you'd blow it separately. Now you're blowing it in conjunction with your with the tekiya. Rav Asi says, you wouldn't blow with 2 neshimas. You would blow out in one breath. Might say Shabbos, they wouldn't go ahead and blow, but they would be mavdil. But they say Amar Yehuda. So when you say Ma'al Mikodesh in the Chasima, Rav Nachman b'Chasima, you don't say in the opening part of the bracha, you say in the latter part. Rav Sheshes b'Avidiyama after B'Sichasa, V'les Hilchasa Kavase, we do not hold like that. If you look at Rashi, V'les Hilchasa Kavase, Shari Limnoi say the Havdalah Subah. The reason why you say all the Havdalahs, you're counting the different Havdalahs of the Torah, B'Tchila. Havdalah T'Ksiva B'Araisa, B'Kodesh V'Chol Ksiva, and any Havdalah that says in the Torah, it says regarding Kodesh and Chol, not Kodesh and Kodesh. We don't call it Kedusha Shabbos, Kedusha Kala, Kedusha Chuma. So there, the halacha is not, you don't say in the Pesicha. Rav Doisam ben Kodesh Chama Kodesh Kal. Also, we don't call Kodesh Kal. It's Rashi just told you. Bless Hilchas Kaves. The halacha is not like Rav Doisam. I'm Rav Zera. Yom Tov Shchaliyos be'emtz Shabbos. Yom Tov falls out in the middle of the week. Oima Hamavdol min Kodesh Shechol ubein Or LeChoshech bein Yisrael Amim Yom Hashvila Sheshem Maseh My Taima. Say Navdalas Humayna. If you want to know why, it's the same thing as what is as a Shabbos. You're counting what the different Avdalas of the Torah. And on that note, Hadron Lecha Kol Sheichtin, Hadron Lecha Kol Sheichtin, Hadron Lecha Kol Sheichtin.